Hello, thank you so much for joining Leader Tips by E. If you have not done so already, I ask you to please, let's see if I can get this right. Subscribe, share, comment, and like. Subscribe to this channel. I would love it if you would also share this channel with your other friends and family you feel would really benefit from some of the content that I unearth. I want to also share with you my focus. As having two marginalized identities, being a woman and also a woman of color, it allows me a unique opportunity to bring to this YouTube channel a lot of experiences I've had. My goal is to help career-driven women of color to be able to overcome their doubt, defeat their fears, gain their power, and leverage their voice so that they can positively drive impact and change and also successfully navigate corporate spaces. It's extremely important to me. A lot of what you will hear is based on my own experiences. And my experiences look and feel a little different from a man's experiences as well as a woman that's not of color. And that's why I am saying that my focus and the experiences that I share will probably really resonate with women of color and all women. And a lot of people actually still benefit from some of the content that I provide, or actually, I think all of the content I provide, because I do have a mixed view of, a mixed bag of people who actually tune into my channel. So I want to get started, and that's a great way to kind of frame up what we're going to talk about today. I want to welcome you to episode 9. In episode 9, we're going to talk about how to be authentic when interviewing. How did this topic come about? It came about because I was thinking a lot of us now are talking so much about bringing your whole self to work. You hear that all the time. And as a matter of fact, I did do a YouTube video on being your authentic self in the workplace. And I don't think we really leverage being our authentic self during interviewing. So it is slightly different. And I want to share my perspective. I have had the opportunity over the years to be an interviewer. So I've interviewed people, as well as I've had the opportunity and my fair share of being an interviewee. And as I sit back and I reflect and I think about all of the things that went well and what were some things I could have done differently, I want to share with you today a few key things I did, I know I did, that really helped me to have a memorable interaction with the person that I was interviewing with. And so that's what we're going to talk about. The first thing I want to share with you is that, remember, we're all biased, and we're biased about a certain thing to a certain degree. And the purpose of this video is to not really talk about biases from a hiring process perspective. I do want to share with you some biases that creep in during interviews. So this is past the resume and all of that. This is when you're actually sitting down with Jack or John and you're talking to Jack or John. And so I'm going to share with you a few biases that come into play. The reason that's going to be important is because when I share with you my suggestions on how to embed your lived experiences in your responses to connect and to stand out, it will all make sense. There are a few biases that always creep up. And one of them that comes to mind for me is similarity bias. You probably have also heard it called affinity bias. And it's basically, hey, we got some stuff in common bias. That is basically when a person chooses for you or against you based on how similar your lifestyle is to theirs, your education is to theirs, the neighborhood you grew up, race, cultures. And so similarity bias, which is also affinity bias, it just basically says that people will have a preference for people who have something in common with them. And so when I share with you something I do prior to an interview to be able to make that connection, because I know people come into an interview with similarity bias, it'll make sense. So that's one bias that creeps in during an interview. The next one that creeps in is contrast effect bias. And this is when instead of comparing a candidate, an interviewee, to the actual requirements of the job, we actually compare the interviewee to other candidates who have been in the hiring process. This happens all the time. I know people don't want to tell you, and it does. And so if I know that I just interviewed a Tina and I just interviewed a Scott, I am going to compare Scott and Tina. That's another reason that I'm going to talk to you about what are some things you need to do to set yourself apart from the other people, because interviewers do come into this process. Instead of going back to, let's look at the requirements of the role, let's just compare them. Okay, they said this one better than this person. How can you stand out and be memorable? The last bias that really creeps up a lot, and it's actually one that drove my thought around doing this episode, is recency bias. If you've ever interviewed before, I know you don't want to admit it to everybody, and we know it happens. Recency bias is when you have a preference for the candidate who interviewed last. And a lot of times it's because that's just what you remember because it was last. Let's say, for instance, you've been interviewing for about 4 weeks, and you've probably interviewed about 8 people. It's so much easier for you to kind of go off of the last person or the last 2 or 3 people you interviewed that were more recent than really thinking back to what happened during that interview. And even when you still pull up your notes, you're still more inclined to go off of most recent. And so with that being said, it's still so important for you to stand out, because you don't know if you're going to have something initially connected with that person. So if similarity bias shows up, you want to be able to combat that. You don't know if they're going to rank you and someone else versus going back to the job description to see exactly who is the better fit. And so just in case this bias of contrast effect show up, you want to be able to combat that. And then recency bias. You might be the 3rd interviewee, and they might have 15 people they're interviewing. You don't know where you fall in the interview process. And so because of that, we want to be able to combat recency bias. So Ebony, how do you do it? I'll give you a couple of tips on some things that I do. The first thing, this is number 1, you need to research the interviewer. You need to find out who they are. You have to ask questions to uncover who they are. Maybe go and look back at your past emails, and maybe there's a name there. Just like we can do our research when we're about to date someone. I know we don't do that. But just like we go and poke around and try to find out things about people on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, you have to do that when it comes to being able to learn about your interviewer. The reason I want you to learn about your interviewer is because of similarity bias. We want you to be able to learn something about your interviewer that will allow you all to have a connection, something that you can talk about that's similar, so that you can organically create a conversation with your interviewer. And of course, you'll be able to assess when the time is right for that. One other thing I would caution you on, Ebony is not saying that I want you to go and stalk these people's pages and then come into the interview and say, oh, yeah, I see you have 1 child. That is not what I'm asking us to do. What I am saying is, if you at least know some things about the person, and I really recommend LinkedIn. I was just being funny with all the other stuff. I would really say LinkedIn, because people are going to put a lot of great information on LinkedIn, their accomplishments, maybe if they donate to charities, all of that kind of stuff. And so I think that those are great pieces to leverage during the conversation. You know what? I show that you actually won this award, a Game Changer Award. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? It's just a way for you to learn about your interviewer and then make a connection that will help to even combat, if you all have this in common, similarity bias. The next thing I highly encourage you to do is to have some engaging questions prepared. Let me tell you what everyone does. Well, first off, you have to have a question. When they say, hey, we're finished with the interview, what questions do you have? Please do not say nothing. You should have at least 5 predetermined questions you want to ask so that you can gain more insight. And let me tell you this, the differentiator is not to learn more about the role. And I know that you'll see that out on all channels, everything, to learn more about the role. My challenge with that is that's what everybody does. Now, I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you cannot ask questions about, tell me about the role, the day, what happens during the day. You can do all of that, but that's nothing that's going to differentiate you. I am talking today about what are the things you can do to have a memorable interview experience so that when you walk away, if you're the 8th person or the 90th person, whatever it is, they remember you. So this is differentiating stuff. I highly encourage you to focus your questions around culture and growth and development. If you focus your questions around culture, it does a couple of things for you. It helps you to understand if you even want to be a part of that organization. Just like they're interviewing you, you should be interviewing them. That also lets the hiring manager or the recruiter know that you are concerned about longevity with the organization and that you value your own values and your own culture. And so you want to make sure that it's going to be a value add, a mutual add for both parties. The reason you want to ask questions about growth and development is because that shows people that you're serious. You're serious about doing wonderful things within the company, and you're also serious about your own development and growth. You're not a stagnant person that, hey, I got this role and I just want to be here for 15 years. No, you want to move forward. So I'll give you a couple of questions and you can always look this stuff up, but some great culture-related questions might be, what do you love most about the culture of this organization? What do most of the employees say about the culture? Which holidays do you celebrate that really have stood out for you? Great questions. Some questions you can ask about learning and growth opportunities. When I'm interested in learning a new skill, how do I go about doing that? What resources do you all have in place? How do you all determine who gets chosen for the next position? That's very important because some companies have a tenure bias. So they don't care what your performance is like. As long as you've been at the company for 15 years, they'll just give you a role. You might not want to be a part of that organization.
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, y'all, I'm not recording this over. That's this thing going on, and we're going to continue to go. All right, so here's the last piece. The last one, I would say. So let me just recap. The first 2 tips I said that will help you to differentiate yourself from others during interviews based on those biases we just talked about, we know show up, would be to research the interviewer or the hiring manager on LinkedIn so you can find some commonalities. And then I think it's a great idea for you to see what achievements they've made and kind of bring that out as well. Also have some engaging questions you want to ask, particularly around company culture and also learning and growth opportunities. Now, here's the last one, which I know I might get a little pushback, and I'm fine with that. I just ask you all to try it. I promise you it works. I want you all to know that people truly do like to connect with people. They really do. I don't care who it is. I don't care what it is. People love to connect with people. We are talking about, we want you to show up and be your authentic self, and you have to do it during your interview process. So a couple of things. I highly encourage you to first reflect on your personal lived experiences and begin to appreciate those lived experiences. And now this is when it gets a little tough. So I appreciate the fact that my mom was a single mom taking care of me. I appreciate the fact that my mom had my brother when I was 9 years old. And so at the age of 9, I was taking care of a child while my mom went to work. I appreciate the fact that when we moved to the suburbs and we were all by ourselves, just my mom and I, at the age of 7, I had to go to a school where I was the only. It was probably about 4 African Americans within the elementary school. I appreciate that I had to sit on the dark bus stop at the age of 7 to get to school. Why do I say that? I want you to appreciate your experiences. Your experiences have made you who you are today. And I'm going to tell you, you can learn any skill in the world. However, the experiences and the defining moments you have had in your life, those are the moments and the skill sets that develop character. And character does not alter. A skill, it can kind of go back and forth. And your innate who you are, wherever it was formed, from whatever experience, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, I want you to reflect on it, think about it. And then I want you to draw a line and put, what did I learn? What skill was developed? Me having to take care of my brother at 9 years old definitely developed the skill of independence. It also developed a skill of me observing because I had to watch my mom meticulously so I could show up and do the things I had to do. It also helped me to be very creative when I wanted to do certain things, yet I had to take care of my brother. So I'm telling you, there are skills that were developed from your personal experiences. If you grew up in an environment where you didn't know where your next meal was coming from, there is something about that experience that makes you who you are today. And that you want to leverage and you want to share. Let's talk about how. So the first thing is, I am not saying that you go to an interview with Tammy or John or Jack and you just unearth all of, I was raised up with a single mama and I am not saying that. So please do not take that from this video. What I am saying is that when you start to give a little bit of yourself and wrap that into how that has driven positivity and drove different results in the workplace, it's a very, very defined, definite, and concrete example. And so what I encourage you to do when you're answering the questions, everyone pretty much knows now that you need to use situation, behavior, and impact. I think a lot of people who go through interviewing, they know that. So guess what? That's what everyone will do. They're going to have their time when they failed at something. They're going to have their time when they were very successful. They're going to have their time when there was conflict. They're going to have their time when they had to get something done through someone else. So I get that. And so be prepared for those hypothetical what if questions. But what's going to differentiate you from everybody else is when you infuse your personal lived experience into that. So let me give you an example. I appreciate you asking me about a time when I had to work well with others just to get a job done. So not only have I been able to do that professionally, and I just shared the examples. So I've shared the examples, everyone, on the professional way. Do you mind if I also provide you a little bit more personal context? Sure. Growing up as a child, I was an only child for 9 years. And me and my mom actually moved from our hometown to the suburbs where I was actually like the only. It probably was about 4 of us, African Americans, and only 2 African American girls in the environment. And so what did that do? And why do I share that with you? I share that with you because my relationship building started way before my first job. My relationship building, the ability to connect with others, to listen and to learn from others started when I was 7 years old. when I was placed in an environment where people did not look like me. And so I had to learn to listen. I had to learn to pay attention to my surroundings. I had to learn the value of learning about other people in order to draw those connections. And so all of those things have helped me to be wildly successful when it comes to building relationships internally and externally at work. I did not pour out my whole life story, and I gave a snippet. I'm going to tell you, you will be remembered. So if they interviewed you and you were the 7th one, and now they're at the 15th one, all other people are saying the same stuff. They're just talking about the professional, the work. You leverage your experiences. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. I hope that it has added value. I hope that it has encouraged you to not be disappointed or have regrets about any of our lived experiences. Think about 2 defining moments in your life that were lived experiences that are personal. And when you think about those 2 things, I want you to write down what skill was developed or enhanced because of this. And you will find ways to interject that into your responses when you're interviewing the next time. Thank you. Subscribe, like, share, comment. I appreciate you tuning in. Have a great day. Goodbye.